Are you ready? Are you ready for this? It's that time for Tier List Fridays on Mains and Alts. And we're gonna talk about all the classes with some discussions on each spec because all classes have different specs, and we're gonna have contenders for our mains, contenders for our alts, some still needs love, and maybe one or two that's not touching.
So you guys have been asking for this for like 2 months right now. What are we gonna main? What are we gonna alt? Although we won't tell you exactly what that's gonna be. We will tell you like what we think.
Who is in the finals? Right?
Yeah, like the finals. You know, build up the suspense and the finish. and all that.
So the general idea is we're kind of like looking at what to main and what to alt, not at numbers. Okay, it's very early tuning is, and we're not looking at numbers. What are we looking at is rotation, mechanics, and potential. Okay, and what I mean about potential is like, okay, does this talent tree enable me to be like really good in single target, really good in AoE as well, or cleave, or does it provide me a nice niche, or does it have like multiple builds that I can use in different spectrums of content? That's what we're looking at, apart from the fantasy and all of that. Performance, no way. It's very early to call, although we kind of have an idea on where shit is going to land, okay? But not judging on Warcraft logs or anything like that, or what you see on details. No, it's still beta. It's still a lot of tuning going on. It's very silly to look at that and base a decision on it. Now, let's start it off with the Death Knight. The Death Knight. I will start with the Death Knight because I fell in love with it. Specifically, I fell in love with Unholy, but I saw some frost and my fingers were itching. So, Unholy Death Knight for me in Dragonflight looks like how I tested it in Shadowlands, but way smoother and way cooler and way more capable of doing cool stuff, especially Gargoyle being back and being usable and being an absolute truck of it matters. It deals damage.
It's a beautiful love, man. But I do have a question for you. Is it like that sweetheart love, or that one fling you found in Greece on the beaches and sand?
I think it's more like a platonic right now. The thing about Unholy Death Knight is that, apart from how it works, and I just fell in love with that initially, it's like all the multiple resources you have to balance out and, you know, prioritize everything. It still has the cooldown reduction on most of its things. Not everything synergizes as it did in Shadowlands, but because of that, the game style is much smoother. You can do like amazing stuff as you did in BFA. With all of the wound build, you can go in like multiple target scenarios. You can have like giga single target damage with a lot of stuff happening. Told you about the Gargoyle and all of that. Death Coil hits for a truck. I feel the fantasy of the Unholy has been nailed on, and Frost is looking very good as well.
It's pretty good, yeah. Frost Decay also got a lot of good stuff that people have been asking for a long time, where you can play your Obliteration build or you can play your Breath of Saragossa build. You're not shoehorned into one specific thing. Obviously, the way this tunes, and if you're interested in performance, that can change, but it's looking good. And not to mention transitioning from 9.2 from a degenerate playstyle. Blood Decay is looking to be one of the stronger tanks. It actually feels like a good tank right now. You have good tools, good accessibility to different solutions to different problems, as a tank would, and as tanks would appreciate it as well. Is really cool. It's taking some of the best bits from Shadowlands, moving it over to Dragonflight. Is looking really good. And
all right, it's a contender
all the way up there, baby.
It's a contender for the mains. Okay, now Demon Hunter, Havoc, and Vengeance. Granted, Vengeance looking pretty solid at the moment, it's getting everything it kind of like, right?
Dude, I think Vengeance right now is looking to be one of the best tanks in Dragonflight. With all of the hype that Protection Warrior got at one point, Vengeance is looking really solid right now,
and it's people were sleeping at one Vengeance, to be honest.
Yes, like. I think somebody in the stream came in yesterday and mentioned the fact that, you know, now was doing 40k DPS as Vengeance on the Jailer, which is like mostly single targets, and I was like blown away considering that was the biggest weakness of Vengeance. And it's cool to see that in terms of their design and in terms of like everything that it can do, they've actually nailed down the weaknesses and propelled the spec upwards as well. Not to mention Havoc right now is, I mean, did you ever think Havoc could have so many things, so many tools, so many passes, so many talents, so many abilities that we'd have right now?
It's not an easy spec anymore. The means will be killed.
Not anymore.
Yeah, the Havoc as well. It's kind of the same story with Vengeance. It got a lot of stuff that it kind of lacked. We always mention this. There's no more sinful brand shenanigans over there. It's just, if you want to have like the, I would say, easier route, more passive, you know, spammy build, you can go for that, or you can go with the more methodical. It's there, and also like not talking about numbers necessarily, but you do see the potential there.
Yeah.
You do see the potential in being super good in single target, super good in cleave, big ass AoE, everything. So
I would put it either in maybe or in alt. I'm still not decided because I'm seeing a lot of good stuff, and with every new adaptation, Demon Hunter seems to be cooler and cooler and cooler and cooler, and I've specifically left it behind.
Yeah, let's put it in maybe. It has all the arguments, so it's a strong maybe becoming an. It's not, for me, it's not main material just yet.
No.
But it could be a very strong maybe, not really putting it into an alt yet because I know there's other classes coming up and we don't want to just flood it over there. Okay, next on the list, Druid. And I'm going to start it off, then you're going to continue. So I would main the Druid class purely because of Feral. Feral has started from the gutter, and Feral right now is looking like the spec that it was supposed to be for a very long time. Amazing builds, amazing gameplay, amazing everything. Feral now can deliver on any avenue while being fun and making sense with bleeds and AoE finishers and mobility and utility. You can, I mean, it's a Druid. You're gonna have utility. It's a given. Not as a Feral specifically, but you know, because of the class tree, you're gonna get some. Just for Feral, 100%. If they would have done the right things for Bear, that would be like guaranteed.
That would have definitely solidified Druid for me entirely. With all the issues that it has in the general talent tree, I do love Feral for the exact same reasons that you love Feral as well. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see balance being the way that it is right now in terms of development. From what it was initially in alpha and everything that it got, it took like 180, similar to Feral as well, where you have like all new talents and abilities and things and legendaries baked into it. It has gotten some nerfs, although that's probably warranted right now, but balance has been looking to be the funnest spec that I can play right now in WoW, with the exception that some that we cannot really touch right now. Yeah. And Bear is looking to have some potential where it's missing like one or two things to be actually really cool to play. And I've been waiting for Bear to get this much death for 6 years, maybe. Yeah. And obviously, Restoration is always really cool. And the coolest legendaries and mechanics that Restoration has, which is one of the bigger selling points for me for Druid.
I haven't seen so many capsules in my life, man.
It's a lot for me. So for me, I don't know where you would place Druid, but I mean, it's a main for
contender.
me.
Main contender, again, man. It's this
Beast
is
mode.
the thing. If one class has a spec that is really sings to us and it's like check marking every avenue we look into, like when maining a class, that's it. You know, I don't really give a fuck if, you know, Bear is broken or Resto doesn't really know. If one spec from the specs that we're talking about
so
is
good,
pumping.
Feral got the love that it needed.
Yes,
for
and
years.
it needed it for a long ass time. All right, new kid on the block, Evokers.
Evoker, baby. Well, I don't know how much you've played Evoker, but I have been dabbling in it since day one of alpha, and I have been pleasantly surprised. I'm more towards lean to the preservation spec because I feel like it's the most intricate and coolest design spec in the game currently. Obviously, that's a little bit biased, but it has a lot of interactions that as a healer, I love to see, and I love to feel like I have a lot of tools for different types of situations. And not only tools, but it's flashy and it has cool moments where we're like, oh my god, look at what I just did type thing. And not a lot of specs deliver onto this, and I feel like for a new class, that's something that you definitely want to have bringing into the game. It reminds me of the early days of Demon Hunter, where you play Havoc for the first time and you just like zap around and you're like, oh shit, this is so cool. Yeah. So that's essentially Evoker for me. And not to mention, Devastation is one of the coolest looking DPS specs in the game. It has some pros and cons, and the range thing could be something that you need to get accustomed to, but breathing fire, flying around and exploding things with a lot of like red magic and arcane magic is amazing.
Yeah, I think like the range thing is a lot more easier to grasp for Devastation as opposed to Preservation. Yeah. You can get much easier, but yeah, like just playing it for, you know, the first couple of weeks on alpha, I loved it. It was definitely different, and it was intriguing to see all of the new mechanics, because remember back then before the alpha hit, we only saw a couple of videos, but to actually try it, you know, the skill shots, you know, all of the mobility of the builds, you know, the red and blue build, and it was just fantastic.
Not to mention, man, that ever since you've played it, they've made it so much better.
Yeah,
everything that you might have not liked at that time has been fixed consistently, and this is cool because they're adding a lot of new stuff. They're kind of like a testing ground for probably future abilities for a lot of other classes, and I think they're doing a really good job at consistently listening to players and making the change that they need. So for me, Evoker is a main.
It's definitely a main contender, definitely. Now, for the Hunter here, I know there's a lot of folks who actually love BM Hunter, how it works and how it plays. We kind of like, I mean, I don't have a big problem with it. I know Flame has a bigger problem with it. I have a big problem with survival. I still feel there's a couple of conflicts there with how the general talent tree is and how it interacts with the spec tree. Marksman is kind of mad. So this class in general for me is really not convincing me yet. I feel it still needs love. Like you can talk about BM or whatever.
We can think of the Hunter, if we're gonna put it like into unholy perspective. Think of Hunter having like half of one side of the talent tree for unholy.
Yeah.
What it has, it's kind of cool, and especially Marksman. I love what they're doing with Wailing Arrow, that actually baking it into a spec and finding it an identity into the spec. And design-wise, so far, just looking at the overall marksmanship and what it can do, rotation-wise, talent-wise, and what the potential could be there, I think it's probably the better spec design out of the entire Hunter class. However, they're taking Beastmaster into a weird direction where there's a lot of focus on Barb Shot, which I don't particularly dislike, but the talents that you need to take for Barb Shot are plenty. There's way too much friction in the talent tree with a lot of 3-point nodes that are so annoying and that you really cannot go past, and they unlock core mechanics of the spec. They have toned down on the 3-pointers throughout the beta, but I still feel like it's one of the classes where I shouldn't feel like, man, why do I have to do this? That shouldn't be the feeling that I have when I try to build and play the spec. So yeah, for me, it still needs love. I feel like they're on the right track, but they're at the starting line. They're not halfway through the race yet. Yeah,
unfortunately. But if it still needs love, it's not like in the gutter. It's not in trash. So all the specs need love at some point, but Hunter really needs it, and a couple more. All right, next up is the Mage class, and as I mentioned earlier, if one of the specs is looking and feeling bonkers and it has the potential to be just amazing, and yes, I am talking about Fire Mage here, there's like no reasons to not have it. I also love Frost, and I kind of love Frost almost as much as I loved Fire. Didn't really dabble too much in Arcane, so I cannot really express any opinions on that. Maybe Flame has a little bit more input over there. I feel Frost is a little bit problematic in a couple of departments. Fire is like bang on everything. Once again, much more smoother, same bursty, like going all out, crazy pyromaniac type of spec, but much more smoother. You're not as restricted and as gated to deliver that. The builds also offer like a plenitude of ways to play your Fire Mage. It's, for me, the class is definitely a strong alt. If this is gonna be,
it is for me as well, because in the past I usually loved Frost and Arcane over Fire as well, mostly because I didn't particularly like being shoehorned into like a combustion window. But it seems like in Dragonflight, Fire is taking all the things that I loved about Frost and Arcane and putting it into actual Fire. So it's not like I dislike Arcane and Frost a little bit less. Arcane is doing some really cool stuff with taking a lot of mechanics and a lot of systems that it had over the years, and now making it like an Arcane Blast spammy button and then Arcane Barrage. It actually requires a little bit of thought process put into it. And Frost is probably on the weaker side of what they're doing for the Mage and Dragonflight right now, but Fire is so good, man, that I was like really confused as to why do I like Mage so much, man.
So definitely a strong call. I think this will take the cake for the alts for sure. All right, next up on the list, Monk. Now Monk is like, starting off with Windwalker. I love it to the teeth. It's like what they did with it in Dragonflight. They basically, it's kind of the similar story with how Feral or maybe Dead Knight. So what was Demon Hunter? What was missing a lot for Windwalker kind of got patched up and completed in Dragonflight through the talents, right? So you had the big problem with single target. You have that. A lot of old abilities are coming back, either if it's Azerite traits or even earlier abilities that wasn't there, and it just like makes a full circle on the spec where you can play the spammy spinning Cray Kick build, or you can the super heavy Fist of Fury build, single target wise, with Zuen and all of that. Windwalker is definitely one of the strongest points, and I think Brewmaster as well. I've seen
Brewmaster is doing a lot of damage, and Brewmaster has some cool ideas into it, and I feel like even though performance doesn't really factor into the decisions that we make, at least for tanks, performance
potential is there.
Potential is there. The performance essentially decides how much variety you have in the terms of talents, and it also dictates the potential as well. So we haven't seen a lot of things address Brewmaster, which would have been something that I would be personally interested in. As unappreciative, an amateur Windwalker, I can actually respect the spec for being one of the best design specs in the game, even though it
100%.
doesn't vibe with me. I think it's one of the better, and if not the best design melee specs. It's taking a lot of the weaknesses and crushing it down, putting a lot of strength into what was lacking for Windwalker in the past, especially with single target stuff. So I can really respect that. And Mistweaver just has like all of the things.
Yeah, Mistweaver.
There's so many things, and they have them all.
Yeah, it's complete as well. I mean, now you can, like, for all the folks who enjoyed fist weaving and, you know, healing through damage and all of that, it's there and it's very potent. As well as, you know, for the folks who actually enjoy healing from afar. And you have to remember, traditionally, Mistweaver was one of the highest throughput healers from all the game. It will probably retain that, plus the mobility, plus the utility. I think all around strong alt for both of us.
Go for it,
100%. There's not many things to look on and say, not really, or it still needs love. No, it's there. All right. Paladin. Oh, like, take a moment of silence here. Okay, starting off, Retribution, which was my main for multiple years. Retribution, personally, for me, it's not what I would have loved for it to be. It's not bad in terms of like the potential it has for damage. Okay, it has potential to be very good on damage. I don't like the half-baked things that they introduced in the talent tree. I feel like they wanted to cramp in a lot of the play styles from the past in Shadowlands, and they did it half-baked. A lot of things are missing, or it just feels, for me, once again, it doesn't feel right. I don't necessarily like the push for consecration, and I don't necessarily like to play a build that I used to love, like, you know, the execution sentence build or the proc build. I also love that as much as I love the execution build, but they feel half-assed, they feel half-baked. So I'm not touching it because of that.
Yeah,
Proc Paladin, same issues. A lot of things missing, a lot of things not making sense.
It's kind of similar for me as well, although I haven't been as big of a fan for Red as Marcelian has been. I've been waiting for years for reasons to play Red and main Red, and it seems like not only are the things that I was hoping to see in Red as a melee plate DPS class spec, they're not even given that, but they're putting things that are just like counterintuitive to what you would expect a Paladin and a Red Paladin to be. And that's even more obvious with stuff like Protection Paladin, where you took a big risk in taking away Holy Power Generation from Avenger Shield and just trying to like work around it. That created so many problems that they're working so hard to fix with all sorts of talents. So like a quarter of the talent tree for protection is trying to fix that one thing that they just wanted to remove for whatever reason. Not to mention that it feels awkward trying to get all sorts of things that give you like RNG survivability for protection, and I'm not a big fan of that. For me, I hardly see myself having a reason to play Paladin.
Same story for Holy as well. Again, you want to do the glimmer, the melee stuff. It feels half-baked. It doesn't feel good. It's not complete. Similar to like the push on healing from a distance. They want to have all these two playstyles over there, but as Red, it feels incomplete, man. So this is one class we're not touching.
This is something that we can both agree on. I don't see myself finding a reason to play Paladin, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. Let's bury the hatchet with it for now. Let's go on to Priest. And I know about the problems with Shadow Priest. I'm very aware with it. I am very, very impressed, and I am also like back in love with Discipline. I always loved Discipline as a healer, and it's looking to be one of the greats, especially with you know, the little change-ups they did over there, you know, with the renewal, applying attunements and not necessarily spamming shields or whatever. I feel like you can go for the super absorption build, you can go for the shadowy part and deal massive damage. It's looking to be as part of like the fantasy of Discipline, and I know not a lot of people love it or cannot get into it, but once you understand it, it's so much fun. You would never go back to any other healer. It's, for me, just because of Discipline, it's very high up there.
100%. I feel like the kind of risk that they wanted to take with Prop Paladin, they took with Discipline by taking away Shadow Mend, by making Renew apply atonement, and I think this is an example of a good thing and a success in terms of an experiment that they made, and Discipline just feels a much better healer spec. It was always my favorite Priest spec out of all of the specs as well, and I feel like it's good, man. And not to mention, I'm a big fan of the dual fantasy of like Shadow and Holy, and trying to like mingle the two, and it's clear, distinct playstyles with both, and depending on what build you want to go for, it affects your rotation, it affects your playstyle, it affects everything that Discipline does, and is the type of healer mechanics that I love, which is, you know, why I rank Preservation so highly as well. Shadow, I was never really a big fan of Holy, and although it's probably better than it is in Shadowlands,
it is.
Shadow just has a lot of problems, and Holy is just not
I think
my
Holy
cup
is
of tea.
just a bit too bloated right now in terms of like all of the abilities you are not required to use, but it would be good to use them. I feel I like having like a lot of stuff to press. Don't get me wrong. It just feels Holy is a little bit too bloated.
That's the abilities for the sake of having abilities. I think
Yeah.
like what Holy could do to improve is just replacing some of the abilities, because now it's so bloated. I think it might just need a yogurt to like calm itself down.
Yeah, but definitely an alt just because of discipline. So we put in an alt out there. Time for Rogue, baby. So Rogue, alt specs are pretty amazing. I would make an argument maybe for subtlety. It still needs just a little bit of love, but it's way better than the initial iteration of it. Assassination is looking bonkers with all of the tools. It has probably one of the most, if not the burstiest potential out of all of these specs. And you would think that would be for subtlety, but nah. Assassination looks to be the most bursty, and Outlaw is like how much fun you had with Outlaw in Season 4. Just amp that up to 500. It's amazing. And the builds that, because you would see in the past Outlaw being super good at AoE and cleave, having the same rotation in single target, but now we have builds that can focus more like ambush with echoing reprimand and stuff, or you can go for like the super cleavy AoE per part on the right with, you know, having blade for the hit more than 5 targets for up to 8, and, you know, getting that potential for bigger pulls and all of that. Not to mention, we were kind of like initially on Outlaw specifically, we're kind of like a little bit sad that Blunderbuss did not make it, but you have Fan the Hammer over there, which is basically Blunderbuss, but amped up.
It's so many pistol shots, man. And I think like Rogue is one of the more success stories, the better success stories in terms of a melee DPS. Assassination, in terms of how I perceive Rogue, has probably the coolest designs in terms of the talent and the theme and the potential of the class, while Outlaw is just fun, man. There's no way you can play Outlaw and try to do damage and not feel so good pressing those pistol shots and those between the eyes and those dispatches, man.
There's a lot of buttons to press on Outlaw, and subtlety, once again, it's like was always my first love, and it's getting there. I feel it's not quite there just yet. I feel it still lacks a little bit of an identity. And this is because Shadow Dance is available for like all of the other Rogue specs, but it's not bad, and it's getting there. I feel like once we get into like the season, it's gonna be up there, no problemo. Rogue is definitely a candidate for main. Yeah, take that as you will.
It's a good spec.
What about Shaman, Flame? What about
Shaman is very interesting, and I've played a bunch of Shaman in beta. I've played it in pre-patch with the talents that we have right now. It's actually pretty fun. I get what it's trying to do. I feel like it's just missing something. Like every spec is so cool, and it's like 90% of me making a choice like, okay, I'm gonna play this right now. And Elemental is just really cool, and it has all of the things that I want, but I feel like where's that one thing, for instance, like Unholy, where you have where you can spread all your wounds around, right? That one moment when you know it's like, okay, this is it.
File Contagion, man. That's
File
it.
Contagion,
like,
exactly. Or when you pop your gargoyle. Like I think all of the Shaman specs have almost that. They're missing that, like that one key moment that you can go like, this is it. So for me, a Shaman, as much as I love Enhancement Elemental, it's a maybe spec. Correct. I can see myself playing it eventually as an alt, maybe later down into the patch once I go through some other of my choices.
Definitely a maybe, and I kind of share it. It was like the first talent that is like proper talent, best talent tree, properly done. And it kind of still retains that, but yeah, it's missing a little bit of a wow factor as opposed to some of the mains we are ranking over there. Warlock, on the other hand,
Warlock baby has been getting so many cool things. Like
all the specs
everything
are great.
Everything that you loved about Warlock has been amped up. Affliction has gotten some massive improvements to its AoE rotation and playstyle, where you can apply Agony in AoE. You have upgrades, Darkglare, where it does AoE damage, and the single target has received some cool new tweaks and stuff where you can actually play a little bit more interesting of a single target rotation, and Affliction feels like a complete spec. Destruction has gotten all of the mechanics that made it interesting. It kind of has like a hiccup here and there with the talents and how you're building. You're kind of forced to take stuff that you might not want.
But still.
And Demonology, man, gets the Pit Lord, man.
Bitches,
gets the Pit Lord. Or if you've ever raided in Warlords of Draenor and you fought those big ass Fel Guards, well, now you have one of those Fel Guards. This might not be as big, but it slaps. It's getting so many talents, and now it feels like an actual commander of the demons. for me, Warlock is a solid
alt. Yeah, I would put it like in front of Mage here. I'll put like these two would be like the first that would take the lead on alts for sure. All right, so last on the list, very interesting, but yeah, it starts with a W, Warrior. Okay, we talked about how cool the Warrior class is in all its departments. Protection, forget about it. Fury Warrior, forget it. Arms, get the fuck out. I mean, can we find issues with any of these, like big heart issues? Like, or do we have to like...
It's hard to say because Warrior is doing a lot of things that we've said that they shouldn't do with the talents, but they're actually nailing it. They're putting like throughput into their general talent tree where you can build, and it doesn't feel like it's taken away like the way Paladin has. So, so it does similar things to Paladin, but it's doing it better, and it's actually a really good example of what you can do with a class. Protection Warrior is really cool, and you have a lot of new toys to play with Shield Charge and Ravager having extended or extra charges. That's also really cool, and so many awesome capstones for all of the Warrior specs in the general talent tree. And Fury, you can play with Odin's Fury again.
Oh yeah, baby.
So good. I know that some people are a little bit sad that single-minded Fury is not as good as they would have hoped, and I get it, right? I'm not opposed to people playing one-handers on their Fury if they want to, but it is what it is. It's kind of hard to balance so far, but even if you are sad about it, there's so many good things to be happy about when it comes to Fury. And if you're a tactical boy,
tactical boy, you're gonna have
to slam.
Yeah, there's things like Juggernaut over there, and you know, things like if you loved arms before, not talking BFA times, you know, your damage profile will not be on deep wounds. But if you loved arms and you felt like, okay, maybe it was missing something in season 2 or 3 in Shadowlands or whatever, yeah, this is it, man. This is how it's supposed to be with all of the variation. You can go for the cleavy meat ass, like grinding everything around you. You can go for that super giga burst not burst, but very potent and consistent single target, or you can go for like super AoE, and it's fun and it's
those
rewarding.
Whirlwinds that do more damage than Blade Storms, man. I mean, that's ridiculous.
It's a different approach for everything you want to do, and the builds allow that, and it's, you know, the potential is there for any all of these specs.
Solid class, solid alt at the very least. It's
this is a hard one. So it's a solid alt. Do we put it in front of the casters?
I would put it in front of Warlock. I don't know where you would see it right now.
I would definitely pick my Fire Mage first. But yeah, oh man, and I saw how good it is. I don't know, it's hard. I would put these two, like Fire and Warrior, on the same page. It's like, okay, both of them at the same time.
They're way too good. They're solid classes.
Yeah, but this is kind of looking how it is. So the main contenders for our mains are Death Knight, Druid, Evoker, and Rogue. The first alts that we're gonna level up and gear up as soon as possible are gonna be Mage and Warrior for sure, following up, you know, with Warlock, Monk, Priest, and so on. We're gonna eventually get to Demon Hunter and Shaman as well. Hopefully, Hunter and Druid, Hunter and Paladin, sorry, will get a little bit more changes, something like that. Although I can't doubt
a little bit more than a little bit.
Yeah, okay, it's fine. Not gonna rant.
Needs a bit.
Not gonna rant, but hey. What is your contenders? What are your contenders for Dragonflight? Because we're getting close.
Tell us.
And you know, after a couple of weeks, we're gonna probably make the video that will explain the mains that we chosen and why.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's gonna be different. But these are the main contenders. Okay, so Patreons, we love you. Thank you for supporting us. This is something that we do over here. Thanks to your support with all of the videos, the daily stuff, the podcast, the streams, everything like that. Check the link from the description if you want to know what this whole Patreon thing is about. It's about supporting the content first and foremost, but it's also about our monthly talks with all of the Patreons, getting some feedback in. It's about, you know, custom wallpapers with your character on them. Really cool shit over there. I like to brag sometimes. But also
so bloopers and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It helps us make all of this content for you guys and make it all possible. So thank you for supporting all this time, and thank you for watching the video.
Yes, thank you for watching the video. You have a nice weekend, okay? Because if you're not, I'm gonna come after you, and you never know what happens. Bye!
Be safe. Lock your door.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.